The glycobiome is the most important thing that most people don't even talk about, don't even know about.
Yeah,
That's it.
Let's talk about that, the glycobiome, because a lot of people haven't heard that term, So what do you mean by glycobiome?
Well, there's a sugar coated layer on every cell membrane, lining the bowels, the peritoneum, the vessels, the lymphatics, and everything. So there's this fatty. Every cell has a lipid layer that basically it forms its membrane, and within the membrane are proteins. 80% of proteins in our body must be glycosylated with a glycan, a sugar. And basically these sugars are our communicators. There are attachments. They are emotion. Basically our HLA, our blood types are all determined. And so is COVID mutations determined by a glycan, a sugar. So, this is something that I never heard. I show this and talk to medical students every day, and they're like, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so everyone thinks that sugar in our bloodstream is for energy. I don't believe it is one bit. Sugar in our bloodstream is actually in our cells is for glycosylation, because if every neurotransmitter must be made faster than you and I can ever imagine, it must be glycosylated to function. So there's the endoplasmic reticulum inside the cytoplasm makes proteins from amino acids. Okay, the amino acids and proteins are then transported to the Golgi apparatus, where they must be glycosylated in order to create their normal function or turn them off. And so you must have a fair amount of glycans in your blood in order to provide that. The question always comes, well, glucose is our fast energy and fat is our later energy. But that never makes sense to me, because fat and lipids and cholesterol, you don't have anyone that has none in their body, their cytoplasm. And we do know that anorexia dies fast, and obesity dies slow. The liver's number one function is to make fat out of amino acids and simple sugars. Liver failure patients are emaciated and have no fat on their body. And type 1 diabetics that are not treated with insulin are emaciated and skinny because they cannot make fat. So these ideas are a little radical to what I've been taught, but it took me a while to figure out why my sister Mary Ann died and my friend Dave died. They were healthy people. Sarah Hallberg recently died of lung cancer. And I listened to an interview with Peter Attia. And the question is, well, why did I die? Don't know. But ultimately, we must know. And we have to be honest with our community. And our community is our friends, our families, our neighbors, and everyone. And I think at the end of the day, we don't want to, because I was afraid to talk about carnivore for a long time. I was doing it and I was a little bit quiet. It's like keto. But I figured at the end of the day, we've got to teach all of us so our children, our children's children can learn. But if you read and learn about the glycobiology, the glycobiome, all cancer therapy and even the COVID vaccine is all developed out of glycobiology.
Interesting. About when I'm listening, you say that we don't use glucose for energy, and I'm thinking about I don't know how many times I learned the Krebs cycle in biochemistry and then again in medical school. And, you're talking about, glucose is eventually turned into, I can't remember how many ATPs, now 35 ATPs or whatever it was. How do we reconcile that data, that information with the Krebs cycle and some of this stuff and saying we're not actually using it for energy?
Well, Otto Warburg and Hans Krebs worked in the same lab in Germany, and they were under the same pressures as every other scientist in the world that if they don't publish properly the story they are trying to tell, scientists, lies, damn lies in science. That's my motto today. And ultimately, if there's fat everywhere and there's sugar everywhere, why would the mitochondria use sugar when fat is right there everywhere? You can cut a 2-carbon particle out of fatty acids faster than you can convert glucose to pyruvate in the cytoplasm. So, again, if you just take a stopwatch and say, okay, glucose and fatty acids go, let's cut a 2-carbon particle and let's convert glucose to this, it didn't make sense. So what I had to figure out is, okay, so liver failure patients are emaciated. They're cachectic. They have no fat on their body. They have ascites in their belly. They have paper thin skin. They don't have any subcutaneous tissue, basically. So, but they all have elevated glucose and elevated insulin levels. So if every cell of the body makes fat, uses fat, something didn't make sense. So type 1 diabetics have no insulin. Okay. And so they get skinny and they die. Many diabetics that are insulin dependent lose weight purposely by not taking insulin. So, and type 2 diabetics are simple, insulin resistance. Well, if you always have elevated glucose, isn't insulin supposed to be elevated when you have elevated glucose?
Well, I mean, they one triggers the other. Yeah, sure.
Right. So now the question is, well, why? So my theory is that as glucose and glycans, or glucose causes glycation to the liver, fewer and fewer liver cells are functional and able to convert glucose and amino acids to fat. So now as you keep that same amount of sugar in your body, your sugar levels go up because you're not able to convert them to fat. I mean, polar bears and bears, and you just look around the world, basically, if you're not fat in a famine, you're in the dead phase. And so we do know that, we talk about glucose like it's so important, but ultimately sugar and plants were not part of our diet in any significance for the last 3 million years. We're really talking about glucose as a drug. It's an added particle to the human body that's not meant to be there in any significance or frequency. And so, I know there's a lot of pushback on this one. I had a talk with one of my organic chemistry friends, Fran, and he said, "Well, gee, I just can't believe that." I said, "Well, what other system uses one thing 1 minute and converts to use another the next?" We know that we can survive for months without food, and polar bears and bears actually hibernate. They lose no muscle mass and they lose no bone density. They burn fat. They don't piss, poop, drink at all, and they gestate 1 to 3 or more cubs. I tell my pregnant patients who have nausea and vomiting, hyperemesis in early pregnancy, do not eat food. Your body is saying, do not put those poisons in this body because I want to protect you. Because, I see it so often. I get pregnant on keto carnivore. Then once I'm pregnant, I go back, bingo, miscarriage. It's so common. So again, these ideas are really radical, but I'm willing to put it out there because the science I know that is such snake oil in this world is sad to me. Sad.